With Baldur's Gate Descent into Avernus coming to us next month, I wasn't expecting to hear too much news in terms of new Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition content coming down the pipeline until either shortly before or right after its release. However, this week I was proven wrong with the announcement of Eberron Rising from the Last War, which is a campaign sourcebook of the Eberron setting, set to release November 19th, 2019. Now, Eberron is a setting full of amazing things such as flying magical ships, walking automata, and still even ancient dragons. Now, are all these things worth you picking up the new sourcebook when it comes out on the 19th? Stick around and find out what's inside. Eberron is a campaign world, much like the Forgotten Realms, which the majority of 5th edition content so far has been released for. Eberron was actually first created fairly recently in terms of campaign worlds in 2002 by a man named Keith Baker. He actually won a Design a Campaign World contest by Wizards of the Coast, and his project beat out more than 11,000 other applicants. It was officially released in 2004 for 3.5 edition and is perhaps since most famous for being the setting of Dungeons & Dragons Online, the MMO. Different than the Forgotten Realms' typical high fantasy setting, Eberron has a unique feel in that it's a low magic setting. What this means is magic is a little less prevalent than you might expect for your average high wizard, high dragon campaign setting, and instead there's a little bit more of an emphasis on technology in the Eberron setting, with different technologies such as the flying airships that I already mentioned, street lanterns, and even a high-powered rail system called the Lightning Rail. On top of all these changes, the original release of the Eberron campaign came out with 3 new races as well, which include the Shifters, which are a group of lycanthropes, the Changelings, who are able to change their appearance and body shapes, and the Warforged, which are sentient machines created during the last war as war machines that have since been granted freedom by their creators. It was also the original release as the Artificer as a full-fledged class, as before this the Artificer was only known as a subclass of the Wizard and operated much differently than how you and I might think of an Artificer today. And with the Eberron setting comes an entire new culture and history to dive into. Important in the politics of the Eberron setting are the Dragonmark houses, which are political sects of bloodlines of families blessed with the dragon marks, which are tattoos/birthmarks that grant their users abilities and powers that descend through a bloodline. Each house specializes in a unique sphere of influence, and these dragon marks allow them to use specific powers to their house. And with all of these unique cultures, there are entirely unique cities as well, including a city entirely run by goblins and a nation run by monsters. Religion also works differently in Eberron, with individuals focusing more on a faith instead of a specific deity, as the deities themselves are much more absent in this setting compared with the direct interventions often seen in the Forgotten Realms. Because of all these unique aspects, players have enjoyed various campaigns and stories in the Eberron setting since its initial release all the way back in 2004. It has had campaign books in 3.5, 4th edition, and even 5th edition before now, with the Wayfarer's Guide to Eberron, which was released about a year ago before this announcement. Rising from the Last War will be the official release of the Eberron content from its playtest material. And before diving into what is the book, I know the question some of you may be asking, which is, what is the Last War, and why should anyone care about it enough for it to be the title of this book? The Last War is a 100-year-long civil war between the 5 great nations of the Eberron setting. It is during this time that great technology and magical innovations were made by these nations in order to conquer each other. And it's presumed because of this that a cataclysm consumed an entire nation. And it is this event, called the Mourning, that sparked the final peace talks and eventually a peace treaty. Optimistically, the people of Eberron dubbed this war the Last War in the hopes that such a tragedy would prevent anyone from ever fighting again. And while a peace treaty remains between the 5 nations currently, a Cold War is brewing in which various peoples are building up their technology with the expectation that war could break out at any moment. I'm sure the next question you're asking is, RPGMD, if you just mentioned that they came out with a previous book for 5th edition called The Wayfinder's Guide to Eberron, why should I pay $30 for another book about the Eberron setting that sounds like it's going to cover most of the same things? And let's go over the differences between the previous test release and the official release now. Rising from the Last War will cover a lot of the content that was in the Wayfinder's Guide, but it's going to update all of these mechanics and make them official for release in things such as the D&D's Adventure League. Further additions to the explanations of Sharn, one of the major cities of the Eberron setting, is going to be released, along with a level 1 adventure to be published in the book that it also takes place in the city of Sharn as well. There are going to be new monsters, new developments in terms of the 3 new character races to choose from, the Warforged, the Changelings, and the Shifters, and is also the official release of the Artificer class, which we had previously only seen in Unearthed Arcana. With this, there's also been described new mechanics for any group, such as the group Patron, which is more of a sponsor for the party that allows them to all have a similar backstory, and includes mechanics on rewards if everyone works for the same person and goes out on different tasks for something like a university or perhaps just a rich benefactor. But don't feel too disheartened if you are one of those people who have already bought the Wayfinder's Guide and feel like there's no reason for you to buy this book, or that your book in terms of the Wayfinders is going to be outdated and useless, as Dungeons & Dragons has already released statements saying that they are going to update the PDF of the Wayfinder's Guide so that all the mechanics found inside the Wayfinder's Guide will be congruent with those found within Rising from the Last War. Thus, no one should have any outdated content, but to get all of the content together and the official release of the Artificer class, you're going to have to buy Rising from the Last War. Now, as a side bit of controversy with the announcement of Rising from the Last War, it was actually immediately criticized for the art found on the standard edition cover of the box. People have said that it doesn't fit with the overall style of Dungeons & Dragons thus far, and is much more of an eyesore when compared with the other covers. Now, the artist is actually someone who created other covers for things such as Curse of Strahd, but people still just don't feel like this jives with the overall collection. This feedback has grown so great that Dungeons & Dragons has actually come out and stated that they're looking into possibly replacing the cover before its release in November, though we don't have official confirmation on that yet. And for the rest of us, if this is indeed the cover we're stuck with, we at least have the collector's edition to look forward to. Obviously, there's still plenty we don't know about Rising from the Last War, but I did want to just get a quick video out for you guys so that you know what you're looking forward to in November. If you're someone who cannot wait for Rising from the Last War or Eberron content, I would recommend you check out the Wayfinder's Guide to Eberron, which I'll include to in a description below. But if you are patient enough to wait and want everything in one package, I'll also include a link to the Amazon page that helps me out a little bit to pre-order Rising from the Last War today. If you enjoy Eberron content or are just looking to get out of the Forgotten Realms, you can check out my previous videos on the 5 campaign settings that aren't the Forgotten Realms over here, or perhaps you're really excited about the Artificer and you can check out my class guide for it over here. As always, be kind and like, favorite, and subscribe. I greatly appreciate it, and I'll be seeing you guys next week.